All right, good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to the last in the series of our UMAPS Colloquium this semester, and we are happy that you all could join us this afternoon. And thanks to everyone joining us online. We are happy you could be here. So, unfortunately, we are starting this afternoon on a very sad note. We lost a colleague of ours on Friday, Dr. Ovita Fuller, who was a director of the African Studies Center, 2015-2016 academic year, and she also served as associate director for a period of 2 to 3 years. And so we've been in touch with the family to see what the arrangements are. And as soon as we know the details of the funeral arrangement, I'll let everyone know so that we can, as a community, participate in that. Yeah, it's really sad. Anyway, welcome, everyone. And as usual, for those who are joining us online, if you have questions at the end of the presentation, please indicate by using the raise hand button on Zoom. And for us who are here at the end of all the presentations, we'll have the opportunity to ask questions. So Marwa will have the microphone today, and she will be moving around to pass the microphone to whoever wants to ask a question. And as always, we would like to thank everyone that supports the UMAPS program, starting with the Office of the President, the Provost Office, the Dean's Office, Center for Global Health Equity, and by colleagues who are serving as collaborators and hosts to all our excellent UMAPS scholars. We are appreciative of the service you are providing to our community. Thank you very much, everyone. So today we've got 3 excellent scholars that are going to be presenting their work to us. And the first is Pierre Celestin Uwitonze. Pierre is a PhD student and an assistant lecturer in the Department of Physics, College of Education at the University of Rwanda. Pierre received his MSc in Physics from Rhodes University, South Africa. And while at Michigan, he is collaborating with Professor Tim McKay on a project aimed at the ways in which secondary school curriculum in the sciences, especially physics, can be enriched to improve students' understanding of thermodynamic concepts in Rwanda. His paper today is titled Misconceptions in Thermodynamics Among High School Students in Rwanda. And next on my list is Anne Jepkemboi. Anne is a lecturer in the Department of History, Archaeology, and Heritage Studies at Kyambogo University, Uganda, where she also received a master's degree in history. She's a PhD candidate at Makerere University, Uganda, and she's working on a project titled Plantation Agriculture and Socio-Economic Development, Sugarcane Growing in Jinja and Mayuge districts between 1930 and 2018. While at Michigan, she's collaborating with Dr. Ellen Poti of the Department of History. Our presentation today is titled The Political Economy of Sugar Production and Development in Uganda between 1930 and 2018. Then last on the list is Dr. Celso Monjane. Dr. Monjane is an assistant professor in the School of Governance at Joaquim Chissano University in Maputo, Mozambique. He recently graduated from Roskilde University in Denmark, where he obtained his PhD in political science. He has also completed postgraduate courses in applied data science at the University of the Wits in South Africa. While here, he has been collaborating with Professor Ann Pitcher of the Departments of Afro-American African Studies and Political Science on a project aimed at understanding state business linkages in Mozambique. His presentation this afternoon is titled The Political Economy of Natural Resources in Sub-Saharan Africa, the Case of Mozambique. Please join me in welcoming all of these scholars today. So Pierre, you go first. So each of the scholars will have 20 minutes to present their work, after which there will be Q&A. Thank you.
Thank you for this time. My name is Pierre Celestin Uwitonze. I'm from Rwanda. I'm going to present a part of my PhD project entitled Misconceptions in Thermodynamics Among High School Students in Rwanda. These are the outlines of my presentation. So I want to establish a background of my presentation. We have UN Sustainable Development Goals, Agenda 2030. In its fourth goals, it talks about equitable and quality education. We have also, the Africa Agenda 2063. The second goals talk about also the quality education and innovation and technology. It's Agenda 2063. I don't know why it is far away from 30, but that's it. So, yeah. So if we talk about world population today, we see the African population. At the bottom, we have a lot of young people are below, and the medium average age around 18. While if we go to USA, the medium is quite double, and the world population, the medium is 30. So you can see that the population of Africa, most of them are still at the school. So now we have Africa has obligation to train the workforce of tomorrow compared to others. So again, if we see the trend of population in coming years, we can see here the plot of different regions. We have here, like here, the Eastern Asia. We have like China, and we have also the Middle Asia, like India and Pakistan. And we have also the USA and Europe, North America. It's almost constant here. But you have also Africa, Sub-Saharan Africa is increasing exponentially. So in some years in the future, the African population will increase above the other, because the trend of other is almost becoming constant. So the problem we have, Africa has the challenge of to prepare for the workforce of the tomorrow. And Africa system education has many problems to achieve the goal, but again, we need a partnership for all if we need to have a better tomorrow. So I want also to speak about the quote of famous and heroes of our history, what they talk about education. Like Mandela says, education is the most powerful weapon which you can use to change the world. And Malcolm X, civil rights activist, said, education is the passport to the future, for tomorrow belongs to those who prepare for it today. And the President Benjamin Franklin says, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. And again, the SDGs, UNESCO says, education is the main driver for achieving the other SDGs. So I'm going fast. So why STEM education? Because with STEM education, we have to provide innovative solutions to SDGs. You know, the world is becoming technology. Technology of today is not longer technology of tomorrow. So we need to emphasize more on technology and science. So there is a potential to produce tolerant and peaceful society, powerful way of thinking, and it is the world of work and the economy of tomorrow. Now let's talk about Rwanda, because I'm working in the Rwanda context. The Rwanda is a teeny country in Central Africa. Is small, 26,000 kilometers squared, and it is the most dense country, highly dense. But Rwanda, it comes from the terrific history of genocide, where everything was destroyed in 1994 during the genocide against the Tutsis. But within 20 years, the country is promising in terms of development and in terms of cleanliness, empowering women and the youth. There is also programs going on, one laptop per child. But we are still poor countries, and we are emphasizing to develop the tourism cultural norms. And the Rwanda education system is like other countries. It have different levels: primary, nursery, primary, secondary, and tertiary. But this level, like from nursery to secondary, is free. It's free for everybody. But we still have enrollment is still. We have been able to achieve the almost universal primary education is almost there. But still we have also some challenges in the other levels. That's all of this is because of its leadership. Our president is quite doing well. So the Rwanda curriculum is using competence-based curriculum from 2015. So why competence-based curriculum? Because competence-based curriculum was established to replace knowledge-based curriculum. So the aim was to train people to be able to compete to the job market competition. So we'll be able to compete. But the competence-based curriculum was borrowed from USA and Europe, but other African countries also are using it: Rwanda, Zambia, Tanzania, South Africa, Nigeria, Kenya, and Ethiopia, and others. What is the approach of competence-based curriculum? The approach, because the former curriculum was basing only on knowledge, but with this CBC, competence-based approach, is including also skills and attitudes. We have a holistic approach. But there will have still challenges to implement this CBC. If we analyze in 3 aspects, actually are four aspects. In pedagogy, teachers have been trained, but they're still struggling to know what is the new curriculum, what is about. And curricula have been established, but because its urgency was not revised by experts, so it will have been developed and implemented directly without being revised. Material, there are still problems of lab material, textbooks. Students are not having enough. So assessment, the problem of assessment, the government or the examination, national examination, is still using the former curriculum, which become an impact to teacher. They reverse to the former curriculum for not being blamed or for not doing anything. So there are also other problems related to teaching workloads, big size of students, and also the lower salary of teachers. Okay, let's come back now to the misconceptions. Why misconception? Because misconceptions impaired true learning. So I have to go quick, sorry. So the objectives of my work, I have 3 objectives. The first one is to identify common misconceptions in thermodynamics among Rwanda high school students. The second one is to identify the source of student misconceptions. And the third one is to design an alternative instruction to remove those misconceptions. So those are questions for every objectives. Now the method, every objective we have its method. The first objective I have already used the survey, quantitative. Second one is a kind of mixture, quantitative and qualitative. There is interview, document analysis, and observation. And the third one, I will use an action research, which is a kind of quantitative and qualitative, whereby you do a research aiming to improve the practice. Now let's see the misconceptions in physics, in literature. Yep. So the physics educational research has documented many misconceptions in different topics, including thermodynamics. The common misconception in thermodynamics, which are at the level of high school students, it's at a lower level, not high level, because thermodynamics is a broad. So, yeah, we have some misconceptions. Heat is a substance. Heat is not energy. Heat is temperature, and temperature are the same things. Heat and cold flow like liquids. Temperature can be transferred. Ice is at 0 degrees Celsius. Water cannot be at 0 degrees Celsius. Steam is more than 100 degrees Celsius. All of them are misconceptions. Yes. So, where misconceptions come from? They come from the daily life experience of teachers, or students, sorry, even teachers. Yeah. So this is the daily experience of students. How to correct them? So the research has shown that misconceptions are very hard to correct, and traditional way of teaching fail to correct them. And if the better way to correct them, you have to know them first. So again, you need to provide a time of students to discuss and with peers and to confront them to be able to remove. So, but we need also a developed curriculum that enable that. So I'm going to present some preliminary results. So when we tested the students, our questionnaire had 29 questions. That is how the student was scoring at every questions. And that is how student was scoring on the correct answers. You can see here, for example, question 5, students are failing lamentably. Only 9% are making it correct, but the average is 34. Normally, the average below 50 is, you can consider as they have misconceptions. Here, they have misconceptions. But at this question, for example, they don't have misconceptions, some. Yeah. So we have wanted to see if the factor of gender has an impact on the misconception. We have females in blue, and you have male in red. So, for example, first question, male was scoring higher than a female. But at the whole test, the average is almost the same, because statistically, t-test is showing that the t-test is above 0.05, that means is not statistically significant. That means the average are the same. There is no difference. Now, the same tests have been given to teachers, and we have found that teachers also have some misconceptions, although are not the same as students. But in some questions, we have here, for example, question 17, they have misconceptions, but in other questions, they are doing well. The average is 45. They scored 44%. But for teachers, we could not analyze the factor of gender because female teacher was very low. We could not find that factor, but we could find the factor of experience because we expect that more experienced teacher will not have the misconception. But what we found that there is no difference. Our statistics show us that the difference is not statistically significant. They have misconception. In some questions, the less experienced was even scoring higher than experienced. When we compared the students' score and teacher score, that is what we got. So in some question, teachers are scoring higher, but in other question like this, even students are scoring higher than teachers. So maybe the student was answering in randomly by guessing. What is that we expect? But still, there are some questions like question 6, all of them are failing. Question 19 are failing, all of them. So we are going to see. Maybe we are going to see why. So for example, this is one question I want to give an example. Regis take 1 cup of water at 40 degrees Celsius and mixes it with 1 cup of water at 1 degree Celsius. What is the most likely temperature of the mixture? You can guess. What is 50? Okay. Is 50? Okay, maybe. Sorry? 20. Okay. Let's see. Yeah, that is the answer. So that is how the students was scoring. Most of them said it's the D. It's 50. So they was taking 40 and they add 10, it makes 50. And the second one, they was saying C. They subtracting. So this is a misconception. What is a misconception? The temperature is a substance that can be added or subtracted. And the thermal equilibrium is not a concept. Actually, if we have a cup of water, higher temperature and lower temperature, if we mix it, we expect to have the middle, the temperature will be in the middle of two. So what is the equilibrium? So the students don't have that, that concept. So another questions, because we are running out of time. So for example, these questions, these teachers have this misconception of confusing Celsius scale and absolute scale temperature, Kelvin scale. So what next? The next, we are going to analyze, document, and make interview to see what is the root cause of those misconceptions. These are references. I want to finish with the final thoughts. The famous Nobel laureate Einstein, you know, everyone knows Albert Einstein. He said education is what remains after one has forgotten what one has learned in schools. And another quote from the best teacher in the history of physics, Feynman, he said, if you think physics is difficult, imagine how much harder physics would be if electrons has feelings. Yeah, so yeah. I want to acknowledge, thanks to University of Rwanda College of Education to give me the time to come here. Thanks to UMAPS program and African Studies Center for giving me this opportunity. And thanks to my host, Professor Tim McKay, here present. And thanks to colleagues, UMAP fellows. Yeah, thank you all. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you.
Yep.
All right, next is Jepkemboi.
Good afternoon, everyone. So my study on the political economy of sugar production and socioeconomic development, Uganda, 1930 to 2018. Uganda is an African country found in eastern part of Africa, and the study sites Jinja district and Mayuge district also found in the eastern part of the country, the northern part of Lake Victoria. These are the two neighboring districts where we have the large sugar plantation and many outgrower farmers, where the largest sugar processing plant in Uganda is also found. The concepts in the study that would be important to understand, in this case, the sugar plantation in discussion is a privately owned large-scale land under sugarcane. It also has a processing unit. It hires resident and non-resident workers, both in the fields and in the factory. Then we have the outgrower scheme, which is an institutional arrangement for the production and marketing of sugarcane. An outgrower farmer is an independent smallholder farmer who is integrated into commercial farming by the large farm or factory, where he supplements the supply of the plantation. Then we have the nucleus outgrower model that is used in this site, a type of farming where the farm, which has a nucleus estate and a processing unit, integrates the outgrower farmers to boost its production. Taking you through the history of sugar cane growing in Jinja and Mayuge district. 1930, this was when the first production of sugar by Uganda Kakira Sugar Works, which is a privately owned sugar company owned by an Asian family, began its first production using a plantation model. Then in 1958, there was an integration of outgrower farmers in sugarcane growing. 1963, because of the increase in the number of outgrower farmers, the company adopted the nucleus outgrower model in sugarcane production. And in 1972, the sugar industry collapsed in Uganda because of the economic war that was staged by Idi Amin, and that led to the expulsion of Asians. 1989, the restoration of the sugar industry with the coming to power of the NRM government. And in 1992, the outgrower scheme was revived. So from 1992 up to 2018, there has been an expansion in the scheme, whereby at first, when they had only 4 large-scale farmers in 1958, in 2018, they had about 10,000 outgrower farmers. The land under sugarcane also, the plantation by 2018, the plantation had 10,000 hectares of land under cane. And the outgrowers had 31,000 hectares, supplying 50% of the cane in the factory. So this is Kakira Sugar Factory, And this is its nucleus cane estate, the 10,000 acres of land. This is the expulsion of pictures during the expulsion of Asians by Idi Amin. It's important in the history of sugar industry in Uganda because, as I've said, the sugar industry was run and is still run by the Asians. So when they were expelled, it brought a downfall in the industry. The problem, now with the growth and expansion of sugar production, what were the land and labor dynamics and what were the ramifications on socioeconomic development over time? The objectives of the study, I have 3 of them. 1 is to establish the genesis and growth of the sugar plantation. 2, examine the operations of the sugarcane plantation system. 3, to examine the role the plantation system played in socioeconomic development. Literature on the use of contractual arrangements as a way of bringing about socioeconomic development is still a contested ground. There are 2 popular strands, and the debates surrounding it are polarized into win-lose narratives, and the outcomes are always context-specific. The methods, this is a qualitative study, and purposive and snowball sampling techniques were used. The study population included district officials who are in the agricultural sector, the local council officials, sugar company officials, and the outgrower farmers themselves. Data sources being a historical study, they used both primary and secondary sources. Primary sources included interviews that I held with the people, and archival material, mainly to help get information about the colonial period. On the driving forces in the sugarcane expansion, 1 were the policies, both state policies and international development policies. Under state policies, both colonial and post-colonial policies that aimed at production of export crops that would generate revenue to the government played a role. Policies that were aimed at development, import substitution, and the structural adjustment policies in the 1980s and 1990s that brought about the privatization and liberalization policies. And in this case, the liberalization policies led to the establishment of another sugar industry in Mayuge in 2006, so that in the 2 districts now there are 2 sugar factories. Then the needs of the the international development policies, and you look at the World Development Report 2008, it advocates for the integration of smallholder farmers in agribusiness with the aim of improving the welfare of the people in the rural areas. The needs of the sugar farms, with time the sugar farms have purchased machines that process more sugar, and therefore they need a lot of raw materials to meet the milling capacity. Then the entry of smallholder farmers goes without saying. The moment they entered into the production of sugarcane, more land was put under cane. Then the demographic factors, as the population increases, there is need for more sugar, and therefore the farmers produce that sugar and put more of their land under sugarcane. Change in diet and change in lifestyle, the kind of foods that we eat and all that also creates the demand for sugar. Then when it comes to the, okay, here's, where am I running? The incentives. Why are these outgrower farmers, why are there many of them entering into sugarcane production? So it is not only the economic factors that has led them to produce sugarcane. There are others, like the nature of the crop. Like one of the farmers indicated that sugarcane is a lazy man's crop. Much money is required during the first planting, while second and third crop does not require seed cane, and weeding is only done once, which is also not as intensive as the first. So he's just looking at how much effort he's going to put in the growing of this crop. He finds it is better than growing maize or any other crop, so he prefers to grow sugarcane. Then under economic factors, of course, many of them say they have got some money, or it is well paying. Like this one noted that on my acre, which crop can give me 5 million shillings in a lump sum? I better go for sugarcane. Coffee takes 4 years. I would have cut sugarcane 3 times. Another one, if I could supply sugarcane to the sugar factory over the next years, I would become a millionaire, and so on and so forth. Why is it not moving? Okay. Then now on the ramifications, the positive ones. Sugarcane has generated income to some of these farmers. Like this one noted, sugarcane growing changed my standard of living. I now have a permanent house, which I never had before. I have paid school fees for my children to have graduated from Makerere University, and others. Then also it has generated employment in the plantations, in the factory, and also in the outgrower scheme, where many youth are actually employed in the outgrower scheme. Others have been employed as drivers of the trucks that ferry cane from the farms to the factory. However, there have been challenges also in the plantation and the nucleus outgrower model. When we look at, as much as we are saying employment was generated, when you look at the type of employment that was generated, you look, for example, in the plantation during the colonial period up to 1965, the plantation estate used foreign migrant labor, mainly from Rwanda, Burundi, and the Belgian territories of Congo. Then from 1965 up to 2018, it mainly depends on migrant labor from the country. So they don't have the local people working in the plantation. They are people who have come from out and who are target workers. After getting whatever they are aiming at, they leave, they go back home. Then the reliance on expatriates in permanent top management positions in the factory. When you go there, you find people from Zimbabwe, from South Africa, Europeans, Asians, occupying the highest positions that are well paying. Then the rest of the positions also are competitive. You apply and whoever gets is given the position. Then they talk of the discrimination in salaries. Like this there's a man who worked there during the colonial period towards the end, and he's a retired worker from that factory. He said that the Asians were the bosses. Even when carrying out the same duties in the factory with an Asian, his wage was higher than yours. At times, they did not have the skills. It is you, the African, who will teach him what to do, but he would always earn more than you. Then another noted that they promoted their people and left us in the same position even when we had acquired the skills. Then in the outgrower scheme, you find that most of the outgrower farmers use children. So there is child labor in the outgrower farms. And of course, children are paid very little amount of money. So here, the picture like this is a child he has cut the cane and he is tying. So when you tie like that, you are paid 1,000 Ugandan money. Then for the youth, they pay 2,000. So they prefer the children because they are cheaper. Another challenge that has come up, which also affects the income generation of the outgrower farmers or the smallholder farmers, the issue of land dispossession and displacement. It is very common, or many people know that the plantations are the ones that lead to dispossession of land. But in this case, the plantations did not dispossess land, but the displacement happens in the outgrower scheme. In the plantation, the only thing that I found which talked about land being, or Africans being displaced, was a letter written by the clan leaders in that region to the governor during the colonial period, where it indicated that at all times when the point of land was discussed in the Busoga Council held between 16th to 23rd of August 1949, it was not accepted that the inhabited lands of Kakira be given to Kalidas. Kalidas is the Asian who owns the company. What is surprising to the people was to see the district commissioner has acted together with Kalidas to force our people to quit their own places for Kalidas' sake. A sign showing that some people were forced out in order for these Asians to be given land. But otherwise, the indication was that this plantation was set up during the colonial period, the population was still very low, and land was available. But when you look at in the outgrower scheme, there is a lot of dispossession and displacement. And it is good also to note that the outgrower scheme was proposed instead of plantations because plantations were seen to be displacing people. But now it has happened that the people are being displaced in the outgrower schemes. And the reason is because of the rise of a new class of farmers who are referred to as the middle class farmers. So when you talk of smallholder farmers or outgrower farmers in these two districts, you imagine somebody would think they are these peasant farmers. But when you reach there, you find that they are a group of different farmers. The middle class farmers, for example, they are not residents in these areas. These, you find they are teachers, politicians, soldiers, or people, businessmen who have money, and therefore they go to the area and buy land from the peasants and then grow sugarcane. And they are at a better advantage because as they wait for the sugarcane to be ready for harvest and be sold, they still have money to keep them going, while the smallholder farmer is still waiting. And whenever he has challenges, he'll always approach these people to ask for some money. And these ones cunningly take money from, give money to these people so that they get the land. And in many cases, you find them, they have been displaced. There is a scenario whereby sugarcane is cut. In one cycle, you cut sugarcane 3 times. So you agree with the owner of the land, you are given land for one cycle, and it's supposed to be 5 years. So you can imagine you're paid 500,000 Ugandan money, that's around $133. Will you use $133 for 5 good years? You will spend it even in 1 day. So all through this, the owner of the land, he has no money, so keeps going back to the person who has hired the land that please lend me, I will add you more years. Please give me some money, I will add you. And with time, he realizes that he cannot pay and he's not using his land. So in the end, he tells them, and just buy the whole thing. There is also social differentiation that has come up in this area, which is determined by the land holding. So the farmers are not a homogeneous group. There are those who have 50 and above hectares of land. These are now referred to as the large-scale farmers. Then the middle class, 10 to 50. The small-scale average, they have 2.5 hectares of land. So these are some of the outgrower farmers that were interviewed. Then here you see the trucks. Those trucks have brought cane from the smallholder farmers. They've brought to the factory. They are waiting to be weighed, and then they are taken. Even these ones, the kind of employment that has been generated also. These ones, they load and offload the cane. In conclusion, from homogeneity to heterogeneity. In 1958, one could speak of a group of homogeneous farmers. So in 1958, when the first outgrower farmers started producing sugarcane, they were all rich farmers. But 2018, we are talking of different groups of farmers. So in analyzing the outgrower scheme and socioeconomic development, the economic benefits need to be weighed against the heterogeneity of the farmers. Thank you. I would like to thank the UMAPS program, Professor Omolade, Professor Andres Kotzi, the ASC staff, Tei and Marwa, my host, Professor Potit, the Swedish International Development Corporation for funding the project, my supervisors at Makerere University, my family, Gloria, I know you're watching, you're listening in, and the UMAPS Fall 2022 cohort, you are the best. Thank you. Okay. Karibu.
All right, next is Celso Monjane.
Oh, let me stay a bit away from this. I'm using this mic or This one? Is it okay? Yeah. I'm not supposed to scream. It should capture my voice. Yeah, thank you so much for the opportunity to be here and present this project. Before I start off, I would like to say that while I'm here in Michigan, I'm working in 2 different projects. The first one is the one that I've been working with my host, which is the main reason why I came here, but it's not what I'm going to present right now. And I may have shared before that my host and I are analyzing the relationship between political party and businesses in order to understand whether the transfer of assets to politically connected groups or people in Mozambique creates productive capitalist class, in a sense. So we develop a database where we map business interests of the politicians. Actually, we have 800 politicians which we have been mapped, and their relatives, and also we have identified more than 1,000 companies in which those politicians are linked to. So there are a lot of coding going on, and we are still working on that, so that's not what I'm going to present right now. But on the side, I'm working on different projects, which is the political economy of natural resources in Sub-Saharan Africa, and I've picked Mozambique as the case study. Different from others, I'm not going to present like finding as such. I'm just sharing a few notes of the research project which I've been working on. Okay, this is the outline of my presentation. As you see, quite simple. I know most of you can relate to the topic or to the project. You talk about natural resources. As you know, natural resources is a big thing in Africa. As you may know, I don't know if you're aware, that mining is the biggest driver of foreign investment in Africa, to a point where we cannot talk about development without natural resources being involved. And if you think about it, I mean, the discussion about the Africa political economy nowadays has been shifting from aid dependence to natural resource dependency. Interestingly, is that these resources have created a lot of expectations. And there's a political, the political expectation is that these natural resources will change the country's economic landscape by boosting business or generating benefits to the communities living in the mining vicinities. But the reality is quite different from what has been widely portrayed. What we see in the reality, there is a tendency for these natural resources to benefit a few people rather than the majority of the citizens. So the question has always been how countries can really make the most of their commodities in order to benefit the population, the country, and so on. So I have a answer to that, which I say the answer to that question will be developing linkages. If, to those of you who might not be acquainted with the literature, linkage simply is the relationship between the commodity exploitation and the development of the industry. What I mean is that in the production of any commodity, many other companies will be involved in the production process. So the idea is to start getting into that link and participate in the value chain. Why linkage is important? Linkage is important because natural resources are not renewables. So they'll finish one day. So as we take stuff from under the ground, you should be able to build more productive assets above the ground, so that we make sure that when these resources are finished, then the future generation will be able to benefit from this resource that exists at a certain point in time. Okay. Yeah, just a point to say, like, linkage is the most attractive avenue to diversify the economy. As you know, that the easiest way or the quickest way to develop an economy is to diversify the economic structure. That allows for economic development in a way. I'll quickly pass this slide. This is just to give you a picture of the natural resource dependency in Africa. As you can see, that the mining sector or the extractive sector accounts for 80% of the Africa exports, Sub-Saharan Africa exports. And we have South African ACDC countries has the biggest mining region in the continent. And as you see like this graph here that illustrates the different levels of natural resource dependency. If you see like Angola, Botswana, and DRC, which are the tops, measured by the exports, of course. And you see Mozambique, of course, is around 55%. But if you calculate the average, you may say, look at the extremes, around, the natural resource dependence for ACDC countries will be around 60 to 70%, which is worrisome, and I will explain you why. But the most interesting issue, as you can see, is that this group of countries benefits only with 80% of the added value created by the global value chain. So this tells us something about the quality of linkages that have been formed, meaning that most of these countries are exporting raw materials. Okay, I will quickly try to explain what linkages is. I've meant economic linkages. Economic linkages, just like I said, is a relationship between the commodity exploitation and the development of the industry, right? And the linkage can be of two different types. You have linkage related to production, and you have the linkage related to the spending of incomes generated from the commodity sector. My project focused only on linkages related to production and not consumption. We can discuss that why I chose that way. In linkage related to production, we have two types of linkage, backward and forward linkages, otherwise known as upstream and downstream sectors, downstream linkages. And the backward linkages can happen in two different ways, in the vertical and the horizontal. Horizontal is basically the spillover effects, which is the knowledge transfer from one sector to another. And we have also the forward linkages, which can happen in two ways, which is the processing, the commodity prior of being exported, and also the beneficiation, where you use the commodity to in other applications in different industries instead of just exporting it. So production linkages simply is the value added in all inputs and the value added in the process. So just a basic illustration that we see like different phases of the commodity exploitation, and in each phase there are so many opportunities for linkages, right, for companies to connect. And this reflects a little bit what I'm trying to explain. I'll explain later on how we analyze this in a conceptual way. Quickly going back to the literature, well, I've done some sort of a survey of the literature. I've read a number of stuff. And in order to understand how linkages are approached in the much of the literature, and I found, let's say, two perspectives, right? The first one, which is the resource cost explanations, you may have heard of it. I may explain later on, but I'm not leaning on that because I'm not using none of those. Actually, it's not a theory, it's just a bunch of hypotheses that have been tested to analyze the effects of natural resources in host countries. Another explanation, the explanation based on country-specific circumstances, that's the way I call it. And within this perspective, there are also two variants. The first variant, see linkages as being dependent on the technical requirements, in the sense that in order for you to develop a linkage from the commodity sector, you need to have companies that are capable of entering the value chain. You need soft infrastructure, you need hard infrastructure too, you need good institutions and so forth. This is more what I call technical requirements. But on the other hand, you have another perspective which looks into the politics of linkages, in the sense that, okay, linkage technical requirements are important, but also it's important to analyze the politics of that country, because depending on the type of politics being played, it may happen that those linkages will never get developed. So analyzing the literature, something I found is that both perspectives explain how linkage can be developed, but it has been done in a separate way. So what I try to do is to pick those two group of explanations and put together in a framework and then use it to analyze linkages in Mozambique. So yeah, just like I say, in order for linkage to be developed, you need the technical requirements, which are institutions, knowledge, technologies, and infrastructure, etc. And that is what I call proximate conditions, right? Proximate conditions because they are the closest link in order for back and forward linkage to be developed. But that it's not all, because in order for technical requirements or those approximate conditions to be present, you need to take into account the political context. It may happen that the political elites are not keen to support the development of local business for many reasons, which I'm going to explain. That's why it's also important to take into account what I call underlying conditions. 10 minutes? Thank you. Take into account the underlying condition, which is more like the politics of the country. What I simply say is that in order for you to develop linkage, you need approximate conditions, but also you should be able to look into the politics of the country, whether the elites are keen to support productive activities or just rely on rent-seeking and other things that may harm the economy. So trying to develop a kind of a model for proximate conditions, I came up with this 3 categories of, let's say, of linkages between the government, domestic businesses, and multinational corporations. Because in my point of view, if you are to form linkages in the commodity sector, these 3 actors are the main ones in order to develop linkages. Because as I said, linkages, it's a link between the commodity exploitation and development of the industry. So in that sense, you need the government. On the other sense, first, you need the domestic firms to be capable of enter the value chain of the commodity exploitation. But most of the time, domestic business do not have the capabilities to do so. So where you need the government to provide support, institutional and organizational support in order for domestic business to develop the capabilities and enter the value chain. On the other hand, you also need the government to come out with which is quite famous nowadays, the local content policies, and make sure that that policy is implemented as intended. That's why you see the relationship between the government and multinational corporations. So if the government plays its role effectively, you're more likely to see some sort of collaboration between multinational corporations and domestic business, because the multinational corporation should be able to share information in the sense of letting business people know what are the kind of goods and services they will need in order to run their mining operations, so that domestic business will be able also to prepare themselves in order to take those opportunities. Right. So just like I said, besides the approximate conditions, we have also the underlying conditions. There's a slight change. On the one hand, we are saying in the approximate conditions that you have the government that plays a key role, right? But then when we go to proximate conditions, because the government is just like the machinery of the state, okay? The group of people who have been elected to run the state, to manage the state. But then when we change to we go to underlying conditions, we change from government to ruling elites. One thing is the government, the other thing is the people within the government, those who run the state, which their interests may be different to that of the state. So it's very much, it's important to also look into the interests of the people running the government. As you know, that all politicians are self-centered. They always look to their own interests. And that is important in political science. You have to take that into account, the self-centered behavior of the politicians. So in the ruling elites, the idea you cannot take as a given that the government will indeed support local businesses. So the question is, under which conditions the government will or not support local businesses? So we have to think now of different power dynamics, because all different actors will try to influence the government to get benefits, pulse benefits, or any type of support. So in the underlying condition is that ruling elites are more likely to support either domestic businesses or multinational corporations if domestic businesses have, let's call, holding power. And the holding power of domestic business come from their ability to generate rents in which the ruling elites can use to fund public expenses or to fund elections, because they want to stay in power, of course, right? And the same with the multinational corporations. If they are able to generate the type of rents that, thank you, Tay, if they're able to generate the type of rents that will allow ruling elites to fund the state and to also fund the public expenses, they're more likely to have higher holding power, because as we know, with the multinational corporations, they usually generate like the foreign currency, which is quite important to balance the balance of trade. So if their rents makes a huge difference, so they will have kind of higher, a relative holding power to influence decisions. So this is an important thing to take into consideration. So what I did at the end was to put this framework together in the sense that if you want to explain linkages, how linkages are formed or developed, you have to take into account both perspectives, which are the proximate conditions, which are the technical requirements, and also the underlying conditions, which are the politics that may support or not the development of those linkages. So of course, this is very, not very much a bit abstract, but there are some indicators to how we can really go about to make those analyses. I'm not going to share it, but we can discuss about it afterwards. Just quickly, the overall, this is the methodological approach of the overall project. Well, I'm not going to dwell into, most of you may be familiar with these techniques and everything else, but something I want to quickly do is to tell you a little bit more about the case study, which is in Mozambique. Although when I started the project some time ago, it was only about Mozambique, but there are a few people who came on board which are analyzing other countries, and then we're kind of collaborating and writing different papers on that. I don't know if I can click on this link over here. Well, okay, but okay, sorry. Well, sorry, can you click on the link, please? Okay, okay, this is basically what my colleagues have done that before, so I'll also do this kind of thing. It's just to show where Mozambique is located. You may know. Could you please, if you don't mind, to click like the minus button? Yeah, a little bit more until you see like the general map. You can keep clicking until you see like the African map, and yeah. It's just for you to have an idea where Mozambique is located, and yeah. Yeah, well, I think we can, I don't think this is important to share. We're kind of running out of time. Well, sorry, can you go back to? Yeah, can you please click on the governance quality? Governance quality, like over there, here. Here, please. Here, where I'm pointing on. Oh, you can see. I thought I could, yeah. We will go horizontally. Yeah, this is just to give you like a brief idea of how the quality of governance in Mozambique. As you see, like we have here the key world governance indicators and how the country has been doing politically. And as you can see, like almost all indicators are in a downward trend, which, I mean, it's bad, as you may know. And it's worrisome because these are the institutions that are required in order for the country to do well in manage their natural resources, right? But that's how the government is doing right now. Can you please go to the next one, which is economic features? Yeah, well, ideally, I should be sharing stuff about the GDP per capita, and also, but I decided to share with you the 5 key commodities, the major exported commodities in Mozambique. This is just to show you that Mozambique is becoming like a natural resource dependent country. As you can see, all the 5 most exported commodities are from the commodity sector, and you see coal and aluminium, coal and natural gas being at the top has the major exported commodities to date. Well, until 2019, but the situation hasn't changed actually, right? And the last one, which is the social development, which is a pity. I just got this data and I calculated the average from 2014 to 2020. And as you see, like the HDI of Southern African CDC countries, and you see where Mozambique is located, it's bad, actually. It's even below Zimbabwe. This is a worrisome thing. Right, yeah, so that is the average. But I'm not surprised, because if you think of the world governance indicators, then you can tell this is the result, right? Can you please return to slides quickly? Thank you. Yeah, I'm just gonna skip. Tay is telling me that I ran out of time. Okay, this is the last slide, Tay. Can you just give me 2 minutes, please? Yeah, I'm not going to talk much. This is the expected outputs of the project, which I intended to generate at least 5 papers. The first paper has been submitted with a collaborative paper, was submitted 2-3 weeks ago. And the second paper is the one that I'm still working on, and greatly my host and Professor Anne Picha shared like a good quality material, which I'm still analyzing it. And I hope that by December I'll be done with this paper to submit maybe in January or February, I hope. And there's other 2 or 3 papers that I'll be working on next year in 2023, and I expect to submit, and I will submit them by next year. So these are the outputs of the project that I just presented to you, and thank you so much for your time. And yeah. I leave it here?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah, obrigado.
All right, thank you, everyone. Please, you can come over here, Pierre, Celso, and Anne. With your mic on, it's time for questions. All right, so we're happy to take your questions. And as I said earlier on, those online, please use the raise hand button to indicate that you want to ask questions. All right, so we'll start from online. There are 2 questions from our online audience, as I understand.
Okay, so the first question is, I think, to Pierre from Jude Okoye. The question is, how often are the active teachers invited to national curriculum review meetings and implementation workshops in Rwanda? And then the second one, I think, is for Anne with an E. It's from Purity in Jerry. Okay. Political economy in sugarcane production. Do you think that farmers in sugarcane growing regions are currently held hostage, whether profitable or not? They can't quit, because the sugarcane production system over the years has held them captive due to long-term contracts with farmers, nutrient depletion, market monopoly, etc. Or is it a political game?
All right, thank you. Questions from the audience here?
Okay, thank you. I have a question, so I can ask for all of them, right?
Yes.
Okay, quickly. This for Pierre. Why are Rwandans still living on $2 per day? I thought that a lot of good things were happening in that country. Maybe you need to explain the nature of the development going on in that country. And then to Anne, I've been wondering if there is anything good that Idi Amin did. What is the nature of the plantation industry now? after Admini, chased away the Asians. Is there anything positive that you can take from what Amin did? Because I'm trying to relate what Amin did to what Robert Mugabe did also in Zimbabwe, chasing away the white farmers. Maybe you can respond to that. And also those farmers that you're speaking about now, are they Ugandans, black farmers? And you are talking about these outgrower farmers as well, being cheated of their land. Is there anything that Museveni is doing about it? Are there any policies to protect them? And then for Celso, I see in your model, you separate government from the ruling elites. And I've been wondering why. Are these people not part of governments? And I also probably would like you to speak a little bit about the economy of consumption, which is linked to the ruling elite in many ways.
All right. Now, let's listen to their answers first, then I will take more questions after this round. Yeah, we'll start with Pierre.
Yeah. Thank you. It's on.
Yeah, it's on.
Yeah. The first question about how often the teacher have been trained in the new curriculum. Yeah, before the curriculum have been implemented, there have been a massive trainings of primary teachers and high school teachers, which have spent like 1 month about the new curriculum, but within 1 month, you cannot expect to master the new curriculum. It's, again, ongoing, depending when the fund is available. Teachers are trained during the holidays, even in the weekends, but it's still going on. But it depends when there is fund in the education ministry, or if there is NGOs coming to help in that. So it's still ongoing. Maybe we expect that there will be a time that they will master that curriculum. Okay,
Yeah,
the second? Okay, the second question is of Professor. Yeah, Rwanda is an African country, so still, because Rwanda does not have any resources, like the resources it has is based on agriculture. It exports coffee and tea, and some minerals are there, but the main driver of development of Rwanda is services, tourism. Also, because Rwanda is known because it has development growth rate is higher, and the way there is easy of doing business, and the technology, the leadership is putting much effort to improve technology services, but we're still underdeveloped country. Yeah, we have many, there is a lot of people, highly density population, so yeah, we cannot say that we are developed. That it is a long way to go. Yeah, thanks.
Okay. Thank you. Anne?
Purity's question on the farmers, whether they've been held hostage. As I said in my presentation, the study on outgrower farming is context specific. For the case of the study area, Mayuge and Jinja districts, these farmers are not locked into that contract. They are free to move in and out, so it's up to them. The Nature Rodwell's question, what good did Idi Amin do? For the case of the sugar industry, it was not good, because once the Asians left, the government took over, and he actually allocated the responsibility to his army men, people who did not have the skills, they did not have the managerial ability to run the industry, and that's why the sugar industry collapsed. And Uganda, which was before an exporter of sugar, became an importer of sugar. Yes, the farmers, they are the black, they are the farmers are blacks. They are the people from Uganda. We don't have whites or any other. Then the government policies to protect the farmers. Actually, there are no government policies that are aimed at protecting the farmers. Currently, the kind of policies that are even being put in place seem to be driving out the smallholder farmers in favor of the large-scale farmers.
Thank you. Celso?
Yeah, thank you, Rhoda, for the question. I understand your concern about the separation between government and the ruling elites. I could add to that even ruling coalition too. It's another concept. I think it's a conceptual thing, because when we think about the government, we see like that huge body in a Weberian way, point of view, like Max Weber point of view. As a formal entity, okay, we have all those functions of the government, ministries and all that. So when you think about the government, we see this big structure, right, which is a way of analyzing it. But then the government is run by people. Of course, the ruling elites are part of the government. But when you think of the interests of the government, you see it as a formal entity. And usually what the government should do is written some way. It's a policy, what government should do as a government. But if you think of a ruling elite, you don't really have that. It's kind of like a more informal way. But these people have power because they are in the government, do have power, and they do make a locative decision on who gets what, when, and how. And depending on what their interests are, they may even influence the direction the government will take. So that's why I say we can analyze the government as a formal entity, but it's also important to look, into the interests of those within the government, which may be different from the interests of the government itself as a whole. So that's why there's just a slight difference so that we can dig deep into the politics of those. You can also have the ruling coalition, which includes people within the government and other groups that are outside the government, but support like the ruling party, so a part of the whole thing. So it's a kind of analytical thing that allows us to analyze the politics, or political process in different levels of analysis. So the other question you mentioned, if I understood correctly, please correct me if I'm wrong, you asked about the politics of consumption. Well, most of developing countries, including Mozambique, they are in that stage called primitive accumulation, right? They are accumulating wealth, that's obvious. And others call it corruption. I don't care. I don't think that's very important. I don't even think corruption is bad, as people may think. Because if you think of the Asian tigers, they developed on the basis of corruption. So the point is the type of corruption, because Asian countries, they made sure that the money that is being channeled to powerful people stays in the country. So if you are accumulating money illegally and you cannot take that money outside the country, you need to get rid of that money. What do? You clean the money, you invest. You build things, you create new jobs, so that you are developing the country. So what matters actually is not the primitive accumulation itself, is how that accumulation has been made. In most African countries, you see the politicians accumulate and take the money elsewhere. Dubai, I don't know, many other places. The money doesn't stay in the country. That's bad for the country because all the money is kind of going away. So there's a huge discussion about that, the politics of consumption, how and where you consume, you consume the money you have been accumulated. So ideally, is that the money that is transferred, not illegally, but maybe informally, to this powerful group should be used to invest in productive activities, at least. So actually, just to finalize, in the process of primitive accumulations, you really need those transfers to take place. You need to build that capitalist class within the country. And maybe formally you cannot because your economy does not generate enough rents that you can do that formally. So you find ways informally of channeling that money to those powerful groups. Actually, if you don't do they will try to undermine the government because they are powerful and they think they deserve some money, they deserve resources. So you can channel them, but you make sure that they use that money to invest in productive activities. That's one way. And thank you.
All right, so let's take more questions.
Yes, thank you very much, scholars, for your insightful presentations. Pierre, I have heard a lot of talks nowadays on the change of the curriculum from knowledge-based to what CBC, yeah. For me, it's brilliant. It's a very good thing. But I think that we need to also look at the teacher. What curriculum are we using in training teachers also? Because even before CBC came, content-based or whatever, and we were using the knowledge-based curriculum, you meet teachers who would give you the knowledge, give you the attitude also, and give you the skill or whatever we talked about in CBC. So personally, I think the teacher should play a major role in the educational dynamics. You can have, especially in high schools, you can have a CBC-based curriculum. If the teacher is not willing to implement it, he will not implement it. And in most cases, you have supervisors. In Ghana, we call them circuit supervisors, who come around and are supposed to make sure they are supervising these teachers to, work. And the story is different. Some of them come around just to, they do a lot of things. So it is good we focus on changing the curriculum, in teaching students. But let's look at the other chain also. How are the teachers trained? The supervisors who are coming to supervise the teachers, to make sure they implement the CBC. How are we also looking at them? And then lastly for Anne, there was an interesting thing you mentioned about salary difference in the colonial era, where some of the people were alluding to the fact that even when they were better than the Asians, they were paid less, Now, what is the current situation? Is there also that disparity in salary, or people are now satisfied as they go through the sugarcane business? Thank you.
All right. Thank you. Yeah, Joseph.
Thank you for the excellent presentations, colleagues. I think my question goes to both Celso and Anne. I am intrigued by the topics that you presented on the political economy of resources and plantation. And Celso, you also struck a point about diversification of economies. I know sometime I read back that before the discovery of oil, Nigeria, for example, was self-sufficient in food production, but with the discovery now, things have changed. Some countries, some small countries like the United Arab Emirates, Qatar, are getting it with just dependence on one kind of resource. And African countries have multiple natural commodities, and we seem not to be getting the diversification of our economies. What are we missing? What is the missing ingredient to both of you?
Thank you. Nancy?
Thank you so much, scholars. My question is to Professor Pierre. And I was just looking at Kenya, Kenyan context. And CBC, we had implemented CBC, and apparently it's a failure. And this coming year, we're going back to knowledge-based. So I'm just asking, how effective is CBC when it comes to like implementation of physics, the area you're looking at? How effective is it? How sustainable is it? So yeah, that's my question.
Okay, so we have one question online. Three. Okay, so why don't we let them take this set of questions, then we'll come back to online. Yeah, so let's start with Anne.
This is the question from Samuel on the payments. During the colonial period, you find the African education, the kind of education the Africans received was mainly given by the missionaries. So you not get them trained to take up these positions in the company. That's why the Asians managed to come in big numbers. But currently, you find now the Africans have also been trained, the Ugandans have been trained in some of them, they are now getting these jobs. So such complaints are not common. Only that they say they are giving the top well-paying jobs to expatriates, and yet we have also Ugandans who are trained and are capable of taking those jobs. So that is the issue that is there now.
Okay, Pierre.
Okay, thank you, Samuel. So you raise issue of if the teacher needs to be also trained in that curriculum. This competence-based curriculum is actually is learner-centered pedagogy, where learner is the focus of the education. So in knowledge-based curriculum, where its emphasis was on the teacher teach what he knows. So there is a little to give chance of student to explore and to be at the center of education. So yeah, it is a kind of dynamics. Well, there is a problem here, because research is showing that when a student is given a chance to study and to learn, and the teacher is there to guide, to provide the guidance and support, so students can explore, discuss, have more time to go to look into literature, to go to online searching documents. So the teacher is there to guide. So because the life is not only on the school, because after life, the learning continues. So even it's better to train while he's still at the school to take ownership of his learning. So maybe it is coming back to the question of Anne. No, sorry for Nancy. Sorry. Yeah. Rwanda started the CBC in 2015. It's still early to know the effect. Even the US, because we say that the US has started in the 17s, but is not fully implemented. So maybe there is some challenges have been found there, but it's still going. It's a dynamic. They know that maybe there is advantage, there is disadvantage. Of course, everything has advantage and disadvantage. So, yeah, it depends. Maybe, we don't know. Yeah, thanks.
All right, Celso?
Yeah, thank you, Joseph, for the questions. I'm not very familiar with Nigerian economy. I may say things which are not right, but if what you say is true, that Nigeria was self-sufficient, but with the oil discovered, I mean, kind of like the industrialization of that country. Well, there is something called Dutch disease, which I think Nigeria may be suffering from that, I guess, if that is the case. But the Dutch disease is when you have huge projects has like oil exploitation, you have a lot influx of foreign currency. With that happening, your local currency will appreciate. If that appreciates, it will make other sectors less competitive for export market. That's one thing. So what is going to happen, it's what they call crowding out effect, in the sense that natural resources tends to crowd out other sectors of the economy. And there will be a lot of migration, labor will move from those agriculture and stuff to mining or oil industry. That may be the case. Wow. And then if you ask me, because with natural resources we have these two possible processes, the Dutch disease, but it's also possible to industrialize from that. And it's not only about like a policy issue, because if I remember correctly, I know that Ghana started pumping oil maybe 10 years ago, right? And they came up with a local content policy, which they kind of prescriptive, which they stipulated that the country, the commodity leading firm should purchase up to at least 80% of the purchase should be done locally, right? Of course, that was not possible because I don't think Ghana firms had the capabilities to achieve that. But that was a first step in order to make sure that these multinationals really the industrial benefit local countries. Just the last question, because I'm seeing it showing us the time, and you are asking why other countries are doing well. I'll give an example of Botswana, and actually the economy happened the same. I know Botswana was a big, I don't know how to call it, they used to raise cattle, right? I don't know how to call it, like what's the proper name for that. But when they discovered diamonds, they moved into that industry. They industrialized that. But Botswana is doing well so far. But the economy is not really diversified. Most of the times you have to look in which commodity is at stake. In case of Botswana, they have very good institutions, right? This is one important thing. And the second thing is that they have the diamond, which has been exploited by De Beers, and De Beers control close to 80% of the diamonds circulating in the world. So meaning that they have control of the price of the diamond. So they do not suffer from the fluctuation of the price of the commodities because they control that. They run what they call a stock buffer arrangement, in the sense that when it's too much supply of diamonds, they buy and keep it, and they sell it again when the demand for diamonds is high. So they can't keep doing well in that sense, right? So about other the country that you measure, I'm not sure what is happening there, but probably the fact that they're part of OPEP, it helps because they can control the price, which do not cripple their economies in a way, I think. Thank you.
Okay. Questions from the audience? Last set of questions. And scholars will have 1 minute to respond.
So these questions are all from one person, Howard Stein. For the first presentation, what do the weaknesses of thermodynamic understanding tell us about the systemic weaknesses of education and how they should best be addressed? What would you prioritize first? For the second speaker, what does the structure of sugar production tell us about the class transformation of the Uganda countryside, and what role has formalization played in the changing concentration of land ownership in the sugar sector? What role is the government and donors playing in this transformation? Third, the weakness of the political settlements approach to understanding resource processing is its inability to determine the forces underlying transformation in advance. How are you overcoming this in your analysis? In addition, In addition, the power of value chain is often embedded in the structure of accumulation in multinational corporations. How can that be addressed in the case of Mozambique as it tries to increase the value added captured in the country?
Okay, so just a few questions that I have for each of you, but I'm going to ask Pierre, in the data that you showed, I saw that 93.9% graduates from elementary school, then secondary school 36.6%, tertiary 7.3%. So what is responsible for the downward slide from primary to tertiary? Then for Anne, so what has been, has there been anything done about child labor that you mentioned in your presentation? And for Celso, I saw that in the data that you showed, coal seems to have grown astronomically between 2012 and 2019. And I am wondering when the world is moving away from coal production. So why that increase in Mozambique? So I have several other questions which we can discuss after the entire presentation. So I'm going to give you 1 minute each to respond, and I'll start with Celso.
Thank you so much. Well, there's so many questions. I don't think I can address them in 1 minute. But I'll start from the last question. Well, I know this discussion today of climate change is going on, but it's quite interesting. There's a lot of hypocrisies around that. There is a push for African countries to leave their resources underground to protect the environment. But the people who are pushing for that agenda are not doing the same. Here where we are, I think the United States is the biggest coal miners in the world. There's a coal in Chicago, Philadelphia, and Virginia. The big coal mines, and the energy mix, coal is part of it. Okay, it's a fossil fuels that are there. So the same we see now with the war in Ukraine. We are seeing Germany now, they're considering to revamp their coal power plants because they need energy, right? So we also need it back in Africa because, you know, close to 0.5% of the population in Africa do not have access to electricity. So we need a cheap energy which can come from coal. You see South Africa, around 70% of the energy comes from coal, actually. So it's not something we will get rid of anytime soon. It's good to protect the environment, but yes, just one thing about that. We see Africa pollutes the gas emissions for Africa. It's only 3%, Africa, generally. If you remove from that sample South Africa and 5 or 4 countries from North Africa, you'll say Africa pollutes on less than 1%. And why we should make that our agenda if you're not polluting the world? Those who are polluting the world should make sure they reduce the gas emissions instead of, you know, trying to create stranded assets in Africa. Of course, you should worry about that. And actually, the discussion now, it's about the climate debt. Those who have polluted should pay those who are suffering for the climate change that never polluted in the first place. But I understand the question, and that's the discussion nowadays. I just try to point to this bit of like a double standards now from certain countries to push agendas where they do not follow the same. Thank you. Other questions, I'll respond whenever I have opportunity to, because of the time constraint.
Right.
Thank you.
Anne.
Okay. So there's a question on change in land ownership. Indeed, there's been a big change in land ownership, especially when it comes to the entry of the middle-class farmers who are not resident farmers, and you cannot place them in the group of the peasant farmers because, as I said in my presentation, these are people who have income from off-farm activities and come in to buy land from the peasant farmers, and they are actually accumulating a lot of land. And this has also led to the formation of classes so that you have the small-scale farmers, the middle, and then the large scale. Then what is the government doing about it? Actually, there is nothing much that the government has done about it. The few policies that the government is trying to make them be implemented seem, according to the district officials in the two districts that I visited, these policies will end up driving out the smallholder or farmers, those who have small pieces of land, and leave the large-scale holders to run the business. Then the question on child labor, it is not easy for the government. I think it will not be easy for the government to come in and do anything, because any smallholder farmer will use family labor to work on his land. So most of the times they would say, but the children, we are working with our children to do farm work. Although the children will also be hired by a neighbor and so on. So it becomes very hard also to tell that this child does not belong to this home. Why is he working here? So something that is, nothing much has been done about it, though.
All right, Pierre.
Starting to the last questions, yeah, there is a government push for parents to send their young children to go to attend primary school, and those who are not sending, they are somehow punished, and they send their kids to school. But the push is not the same when they reach the secondary schools. So some young people just go to work over elsewhere. But for the university, the university are expensive in Rwanda, and those who are attending university are mostly sponsored by government, where they gain loan, they will pay back when they finish. But those who are not getting the fund, because they think that why spend money to go to do university when they found those who are finishing university, they don't get job, they come back, they sell bananas. So they prefer to spend that money to sell those small business instead of going to university. Yeah, that's how they do. So, but I didn't get the first questions. Can you repeat if you can?
The first question is about, can you repeat the first question, Pierre? For Pierre?
What do the weaknesses of thermodynamic understanding tell us
Oh, okay.
systemic weaknesses of education and how they should best be addressed? What would you prioritize first?
Weakness in terms of?
Yeah, that is misconceptions. Should misconceptions be prioritized at the expense of other things that affect education in Rwanda?
Yeah, of course there are many problems, factors about education of science and STEM, but misconceptions is one of them. So misconception, when the misconception impaired the real learning or the true learning, I can say. Because if they keep going without misconception are not addressed, there is no learning, there is no real learning. So in terms of thermodynamics, like we have seen that even teachers have those misconceptions, and how can remove the misconception or correct them if themselves they have those misconceptions. So is one of among the other challenges. Yeah.
All right,
So Professor, can I please have 10 seconds? Just
Okay.
No, I'd just like to say thank you. There was a quite interesting question that was made online, which I wasn't able to respond.
Oh,
I don't
okay.
think I have the time, but just like show my appreciation for the question, which I think is around political settlement approach,
Yeah.
the limitation of the theory, it's not a theory actually, of the approach and how I address that. Well, it requires a bit of elaboration, but actually I didn't take all the political settlement approach. I just went and took what I thought was relevant to my research, but it's something that needs a bit more elaboration. I will do that whenever I have an opportunity. And thank you for the question. We made it online.
All right. All right. Thank you, everyone, for joining us this afternoon. Thanks to those who were able to join us online. So this concludes our colloquium series for this semester. And please, let's put our hands together for our presenters today. And for all of you for doing such a great job. It's been a pleasure working with you in all of these presentations this semester, and we look forward to the winter cohort coming to join us and also presenting their work. So, but well, let's also show our appreciation to the phenomenal work that Teye and Marwa and Gloria, who is not here, Kari, who is also not here with us, but they work behind the scene to make all of these jobs that we do successful. So thanks to them, and thanks everyone for coming. And light refreshments will be available. We can chat afterward. Thank you, everyone. Have a good afternoon.
Yeah.
Thank you.